The CEO stood at the center of the office, his sharp voice echoing through the room. Employees froze, exchanging uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or shrink further into the background. "Your job is to clean, not to exist in my presence," he barked, his words slicing through the air like a blade. The janitor, a man in his late 50s with a calm and unshaken demeanor, didn't flinch. He adjusted his grip on the mop and continued scrubbing the floor, his silence speaking louder than any retort. The room was heavy with tension, the unspoken fear of a tyrant's wrath, silencing even those who wanted to speak. The CEO's glare swept over the staff, daring anyone to challenge him. None did. The janitor didn't look up, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Something quiet, something resolute. No one suspected that the one man the CEO dismissed as insignificant would soon become the key to everything he thought he controlled. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. In the midst of this modern-day temple to ambition stands the CEO. He is the embodiment of authority. Tall, imposing, and impeccably dressed. His sharp suit catches the light, and his expression is often one of cold, calculated control. He moves with purpose, his steps deliberate, his gaze sharp and unwavering. His world revolves around one thing: himself. He sees his company not as a team of individuals but as a well-oiled machine, meant to serve his every need. The employees, though competent, are secondary in his eyes, mere tools to maintain his empire. Their worth, in his view, is tied directly to their ability to meet his high expectations. And there is one individual, always in the background, who stands as a quiet reminder of how far the CEO's perspective has strayed. In stark contrast to the CEO's polished image, the janitor moves through the office with calm precision. His uniform, a simple set of overalls, stands in stark opposition to the CEO's sharp attire. He is a man whose work is often unseen, whose presence is barely acknowledged by most. Yet, there is something distinctly different about him. He moves with quiet determination, his hands steady as he wipes down surfaces, his gaze keen and observant as he works in the spaces others overlook. To the employees around him, he is a fixture of the office, someone they pass by on their way to meetings or lunch breaks. He is the janitor, and in the eyes of the CEO, that's all he will ever be. The CEO walks through the office, his eyes scanning his empire with a critical eye. He notices everything, from the smallest error to the slightest inconsistency. Today, he's in no mood for distractions. The janitor moves near the CEO's office, pushing his cleaning cart down the corridor. The CEO, in the middle of a conversation with his assistant, spots him. A flash of irritation crosses his face. Why is he still here? The CEO waves his hand dismissively, as though the janitor is nothing more than an annoyance. Get him out of the way. The assistant looks at the janitor briefly before nodding and walking away to carry out the order. The CEO, ever the picture of authority, stands tall and composed, his focus narrowing to a distant point in the room. But his moment of irritation soon escalates, and his need to assert control takes over. The CEO strides toward the janitor, his expression darkening as he nears. The janitor, in his quiet way, continues with his work, his back to the approaching figure. There's an unsettling calm in the janitor's movements, as if he's completely unaware or simply unmoved by the looming presence behind him. Without warning, the CEO's voice rises, cutting through the air. Your job is to clean, not to exist in my presence. The words are sharp, punctuated by a sneer of disdain. The CEO's voice trembles with frustration as he stands over the janitor. The staff in the vicinity glance nervously at one another, their gazes shifting between the CEO and the janitor. Some of them are already accustomed to this kind of behavior, but it's still unsettling to witness. The janitor's response is minimal. He doesn't even flinch. He simply nods, a silent acknowledgement of the command, though his face betrays little emotion. He continues his task as if nothing had happened, wiping down the counter with the same steady hand. His silence only seems to infuriate the CEO further. The office is thick with tension now. The employees who once worked comfortably in their spaces are now frozen in place. They avoid eye contact with one another, their attention fixed on the unfolding drama. They know better than to speak up, and they know better than to show any sign of defiance. In their eyes, the CEO's power is absolute. They have learned to walk the line of compliance, never questioning, never challenging. But the janitor stands apart. He doesn't fear the CEO's anger. He doesn't fear much of anything at all. He simply continues to clean, moving from one task to the next, his hands steady and his face impassive. As the CEO rants on, his words become sharper, more biting. It's clear that his need to assert his dominance has clouded his judgment. He's no longer simply addressing the janitor. He's trying to prove something to the room, to everyone watching. He's trying to remind them all of his superiority. But the janitor doesn't react to his words, and this only seems to provoke the CEO even more. You're nothing but a janitor. You'll never be anything more. You can't even clean a damn office properly. You're lucky you even have a job here. The janitor's eyes meet the CEO's for a brief, lingering second. There's no anger in his gaze, no resentment, only a quiet resolve. He doesn't say anything. He simply nods once, as though he understands the message, before resuming his work. The CEO's face flushes with anger, and for a moment it seems as though he might lash out, but he holds back. Instead, he turns sharply, his back to the janitor now. The employees in the room exhale a collective sigh of relief, though their unease remains. The CEO, in his arrogance, has underestimated the janitor in ways he can't yet comprehend. He has mistaken the janitor's humility for weakness, and in doing so, he's about to make a mistake that will change everything. For the janitor, this moment is just another in a long line of humiliations, another instance of a powerful man trying to assert dominance over someone he deems unworthy. But the janitor's silence speaks volumes. What the CEO doesn't know, what none of the employees can see, is that the janitor is not as powerless as they think. As the janitor leaves the office, he does so without a word. He doesn't look back, doesn't seek acknowledgement. He simply walks away. And as he disappears down the hallway, the employees return to their tasks, the tension still hanging in the air. But there's a shift. A quiet ripple of something unspoken. The CEO, standing alone now, doesn't notice it. He's already too focused on the next task, the next challenge. But the seed has been planted. What happens when arrogance meets karma? When the powerful fail to recognize the true strength that lies in humility? The atmosphere in the office had shifted in an instant. What had started as an ordinary day quickly turned into one of frustration and anger for the CEO. He paced back and forth in his sleek modern office, his mind consumed by the failed deal that had just slipped through his fingers. The deal had been important, one of the most crucial moments of his career. But it had crumbled, leaving him with nothing but a bitter taste of defeat. His sharp, controlled demeanor was breaking down. The weight of failure pressed heavily on his shoulders, and as it did, the CEO found himself looking for someone to blame, someone to lash out at. As he stormed out of his office, he moved down the long, open hallway of the company's headquarters. His eyes were sharp, scanning the area for a target. Any target. His mind was in turmoil, and he needed to vent, to unleash the anger that was bubbling up inside him. It was then that his gaze landed on the janitor. The janitor was a man of simple demeanor, dressed in the worn uniform that signified his position. He was pushing his mop across the floor, methodically working his way down the hallway. The janitor's quiet presence seemed almost an affront to the CEO in that moment. The stark contrast between them, one a man of power and ambition, and the other a humble figure who was only there to clean, seemed too much for the CEO to ignore. The CEO stopped in his tracks, standing over the janitor, his breath shallow from the frustration that still gripped him. He looked down at the man with disdain, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and superiority. The janitor, on the other hand, did not seem to notice the CEO's presence. His work was steady, his focus entirely on the task at hand. It was this calmness that seemed to provoke the CEO even further. Without warning, the CEO opened his mouth, his words laced with venom. "You think someone like you could ever understand the pressure of my job?" The CEO snapped, his voice sharp and accusatory. "Stay in your lane, janitor. Your job is to clean, not to think." The words echoed down the hall, cutting through the air like a blade. The janitor didn't flinch. His hand didn't pause as he continued to mop the floor, the rhythmic sound of the mop against the tiles filling the silence between them. The CEO, frustrated by the lack of reaction, took a step forward, his tone growing louder, more aggressive. "You think you're important? You think anyone here cares about you? I'm the one who carries this company. I'm the one who makes decisions that impact everyone. You're nothing more than a cog in the machine, just a janitor." The CEO's words were cruel, harsh, meant to tear the janitor down. Yet, despite the cruel barrage of words, the janitor did not meet his gaze. He didn't argue, didn't shout back. Instead, he remained calm. It was as if the CEO's anger was simply passing over him, like a gust of wind that would soon be gone. The janitor's silence was deafening. The employees in the surrounding area watched this interaction unfold. Some of them glanced over, their eyes wide with discomfort, but none of them dared to speak up. They were too afraid, too used to the CEO's outbursts. This was nothing new for them. It was a well-known fact that the CEO could be brutal, and no one ever dared challenge him. After all, who would stand against the man at the top of the corporate ladder? His word was law, and anyone who opposed him risked their position, perhaps even their livelihood. The tension in the air was thick. The CEO's voice rang out again, a sneer curling on his lips as he towered over the janitor. "You'll never understand what it's like to have real responsibility," the CEO growled. "I make decisions that affect millions. What do you do? Wipe floors?" Still, the janitor did not respond. He did not speak, did not show any sign of fear or frustration. His hands moved steadily, calmly, almost as if he were in his own world, untouched by the chaos around him. The CEO's frustration grew. His insults, his barbs, seemed to fall on deaf ears, and the lack of response only seemed to make him angrier. "I don't have time for people like you," the CEO spat, his voice laced with disgust. "You're just here to clean up the messes other people make. Stay out of my way." With one last derisive glance, the CEO turned and walked away, his steps heavy, his face set in a scowl. His outburst had ended, but the damage lingered. The employees who had been watching quickly turned away, their eyes lowered, not daring to comment on the scene they had just witnessed. The janitor, meanwhile, continued his work, as though nothing had happened. He didn't look up, didn't react. His focus remained on his task, his presence calm amidst the tension. The scene left the air thick with discomfort. The employees in the area exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering quietly amongst themselves. They knew what had just happened was wrong, but none of them dared to step in. They had all been witnesses to the CEO's power, and they knew better than to challenge it. The CEO had made it clear that he could do whatever he wanted, to anyone he chose. And in their world, that was the way things worked. But as the janitor finished his task and moved on to the next area of the building, something strange began to happen. There was a subtle shift, something that none of the employees could have predicted. It was in the way the janitor moved, unbothered, unhurried, yet resolute. It was as if he had not been shaken, not in the slightest, by the CEO's words. The employees couldn't help but feel a small sense of admiration for the janitor. He had taken the insults with grace, without flinching or bowing to the pressure. He was a man who knew his worth, even if the CEO did not. And in that quiet, understated strength, the employees began to wonder, was there more to this janitor than they had ever realized? The CEO had aimed to humiliate him, to assert his dominance in front of everyone, but the janitor had taken it all in stride, showing a resilience that no one in the office had expected. For all the CEO's power, for all his bravado, there was something about the janitor's calmness that stood in stark contrast to his own instability. And as the janitor moved down the hallway, continuing his work with a quiet confidence, the tension in the air began to feel different. It was as if, in that moment, the true power in the room had shifted, if only subtly. As the workday wound down, the office, typically filled with bustling energy, began to empty. The employees scattered, heading out for the evening, leaving behind the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the corporate building. In the midst of it all, the janitor remained. His figure was small and humble, pushing his cleaning cart along the hallway with steady steps. He had made no fuss over the CEO's early outburst. To him, it was just another part of the job, another reminder of the world's expectations of him. He had long since learned not to let the words of others affect him. But the janitor wasn't just cleaning. While the world assumed he was merely scrubbing floors, he was doing something entirely different. In the quiet of the evening, he sat down at his small, outdated laptop, the one he had managed to salvage years ago when his career had taken a drastic turn. On the worn screen, lines of code and completely assembled control panels to work the laptop's flawless controls. He had no need for the newest gadgets, no need for the flashy tech the CEO surrounded himself with. He only needed this small, old laptop that held the key to something far greater than anyone could imagine. For years, the janitor had kept his past buried. He had once been a tech genius, a leading innovator in the world of technology. His invention had been groundbreaking, a software algorithm that could revolutionize the way companies interacted with data. It had the potential to change the entire tech landscape. But in the wake of personal loss and a devastating set of circumstances, the world had forgotten him. He had retreated from the spotlight, hiding away in the shadows, away from the eyes of those who had once admired his brilliance. Yet, even as he cleaned floors, his mind never stopped. The equations, the algorithms, he was still working on them. Quietly, patiently, in the solitude of his small apartment and the quiet corners of the corporate building, he kept his mind sharp. His invention, which had once been the future of the tech world, was now the linchpin of the company's upcoming merger. It wasn't something anyone knew, not the CEO, not the employees, and certainly not the high-ranking clients who came and went in the shiny, glass-walled conference rooms. To them, the janitor was just a fixture, someone who was there to clean, to sweep away the mess, to be as invisible as the dust and grime he was meant to remove. But they were all wrong. One evening, as the janitor worked late into the night, the CEO, unaware of the connections he was about to uncover, made a crucial mistake. He had been pacing in his office, filled with the dread of the failed deal earlier in the day. The pressure was mounting, the merger was at risk, and everything he had worked for, everything he had fought to build, was slipping away. He had one last chance to make the deal work, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. It was then that the CEO overheard a conversation from one of the high-ranking clients, a man known for his business acumen and sharp instincts. The client's voice carried down the hallway as he spoke to another executive. The only way this deal goes through is if we get the janitor to help us. He's the only one who can save this merger, the client said, his voice serious, tinged with urgency. The CEO froze in place, the words hitting him like a thunderclap. The janitor? What did he mean, the only one? Confusion washed over the CEO as he tried to process what he had just heard. The janitor? Was he involved in the merger? Was he somehow connected to the tech that could save the company's future? It didn't make sense. The janitor was just a cleaner, nothing more. Or so the CEO thought. But as the client continued to speak, the pieces began to fall into place. The invention. The algorithm that had been the core of the company's plans for years had been the janitor's creation. It was his technology that had the power to secure the company's future, and now, the CEO realized, it was the only thing standing between the company and financial disaster. The realization hit like a wave, crashing over him with force. The CEO's mind raced, his body tense with panic. He had no idea that the janitor, the very person he had humiliated just hours earlier, held the key to his success, the key to his empire. He had no idea that the man he had so casually dismissed as just a janitor was the one who could save him now. With a sense of urgency, the CEO rushed to find the janitor. His hands were shaking, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. How could he have been so blind? How could he have insulted the very man who held the future of the company in his hands? He found the janitor in the hallway, bent over his laptop, completely unaware of the CEO's approach. The janitor's fingers flew across the keyboard, his mind lost in the complex equations that were second nature to him. He had no idea that his past, the technology he had once created, was now the center of the company's fate. The CEO stood for a moment, watching the janitor work. His arrogance, his sense of superiority, all of it seemed so small now. All that mattered was the one thing that had eluded him for so long, the janitor's genius. In a moment of panic, the CEO cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice before he spoke. I need your help, he said, his words coming out in a rush. His voice trembled slightly, a rare crack in the mask of power he had worn for so long. The janitor didn't look up. He didn't react immediately. He simply kept typing, as though he hadn't heard the CEO at all. I said, the CEO repeated, his voice strained, I need your help. Please, this merger, it's failing. We're running out of time. You're the only one who can fix this. The janitor paused, finally lifting his gaze from the screen. His eyes met the CEO's, and for a brief moment, there was a silence, an unspoken understanding between them. The janitor's face was calm, unreadable. You need my help? The janitor asked quietly, his voice steady. After what you said today? Gavin saw. The CEO swallowed hard, his throat dry. The weight of his earlier actions hung over him, but there was no time to dwell on it now. There was only one thing that mattered. The future of the company. Yes, the CEO said, his voice almost pleading now. Please. I didn't know. I didn't understand. But now I do. You're the only one who can save us. The janitor sat back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. He had heard enough. He knew exactly what needed to be done. And now the tables had turned. The man who had once been dismissed was now the one with the power to save the day. The CEO was no longer in control. The janitor held the fate of the company in his hands. Question number 15. Who was the real leader, and who did the company seek to undoubtedly gesturize an undedicated vestry of force? The tension in the air was palpable as the CEO stood before the janitor, his posture now slumped, his once dominant stance replaced by an uneasy humility. The proud, arrogant man who had belittled others in the past was now the one seeking help, no longer standing tall, but instead looking down at the man he had once dismissed. He had come to realize, far too late, the weight of his actions and the gravity of the moment. The tables had turned, and he now needed the janitor more than he had ever needed anyone in his life. "Look," the CEO began, his voice quieter, almost hesitant. "I was wrong. About everything. About you. I don't know how to make it right, but I need your help. The company, the merger, everything is on the line. You're the only one who can pull this off." The janitor stood there, silent, his eyes locked on the CEO's. There was no anger in his gaze, no frustration, just a deep, quiet calm that contrasted sharply with the desperate figure in front of him. He had endured the CEO's harsh words, his public humiliation, and the crushing weight of being dismissed as insignificant. Yet, here the CEO was, offering an apology that, though late, was a recognition of the janitor's worth. The janitor thought for a moment. His life, his past, his abilities, these had always been his to keep, hidden away from the world. But now, for the first time in a long while, he considered something bigger than his own pride or the wounds of the past. He wasn't doing this for the CEO. He wasn't even doing it for himself. He was doing it for the people who worked in this building, the staff, the ones who depended on the merger for their livelihoods, their families, their futures. They were the ones who would suffer if everything fell apart. The janitor nodded slowly, his decision made. "I'll help," he said, his voice steady and calm, "but not for you, for them." The CEO, relieved, yet still humbled, could hardly find words. The janitor, a man he had dismissed as nothing more than a lowly worker, had just made the decision that would ultimately save him and everyone else. And as they walked side by side, working tirelessly together to make sure the deal went through, the CEO began to understand something fundamental. True power wasn't about titles or authority. It wasn't about who controlled the company or who sat in the corner office. It was about character, about the choices one made in moments of hardship. The deal was done. The merger was saved, and the company had a future, thanks to the janitor. He was the silent hero of the day, doing what needed to be done without fanfare or recognition, simply because it was the right thing to do. He didn't seek accolades or credit. He had already given his best, and now he could quietly step back as he had always done. The following morning, the CEO stood before the gathered staff in the large conference room. The air was thick with anticipation, but it wasn't about a new business deal. It was about something more. The CEO, for the first time, was about to address the entire company, not as a boss, but as a man who had learned a crucial lesson. "Everyone," the CEO began, his voice clear but humble, "I owe you all an apology. For too long, I've treated people based on their position, their status. I've made assumptions about who is important and who isn't, and I was wrong. No one deserves to be treated as less than, especially not those who work hardest behind the scenes. To the janitor and to everyone else who makes this company run, you have my sincere apologies. You are valued, and I will work every day to make sure you are treated with the respect you deserve." There was a pause in the room. The staff, once wary of the CEO's cold demeanor, now stood in stunned silence. This was not the CEO they knew. This was a man who had changed, not in his title, but in his heart. The janitor, who had never sought recognition, stood quietly in the back of the room, his eyes steady as ever. He had no need for a public apology. His actions had already spoken louder than any words could. As the CEO continued, his voice gained strength. "Power doesn't lie in titles," he said, pausing for a moment to let the words sink in. "It lies in character. And I've learned that the hard way. From now on, I will lead with respect. I will lead with integrity. And I will treat every one of you with the dignity you deserve." The room was silent for a moment longer, and then, as if by unspoken agreement, the staff began to applaud. It wasn't for the CEO, at least, not entirely. It was for the janitor, the one who had shown them all what true leadership looked like, the one who had silently saved them all. The janitor turned to leave, his task complete. He had done what he needed to do, and now he could return to his quiet life. He didn't need the applause, the recognition, or the praise. He had found peace in knowing that he had helped those who depended on him, even if they hadn't realized it before. And as he walked out of the room, a faint smile touched his lips, not because he had been praised, but because he had done what was right. The CEO watched him go, a deep sense of gratitude and humility settling in his chest. The tables had turned, and, in the end, it was the janitor who had shown him the true meaning of leadership. Power doesn't lie in titles, but in character. The true measure of a person isn't found in their position or their possessions, but in their actions. The janitor, once dismissed, became the silent hero of this story, and the CEO, humbled by his own mistakes, learned that the greatest strength lies not in dominance, but in respect and kindness. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a situation where someone underestimated another person? How did it turn out? Throughout the story, the CEO underestimated the janitor, dismissing him as nothing more than an invisible cog in the corporate machine. But what if the tables had been turned? What if someone underestimated you or someone else? Have you ever witnessed a situation like that, where someone was looked down upon, only to later reveal their true strength or worth? How did it turn out? Was there a shift in perception, or was it too late for redemption? Think back to those moments in your own life and share your thoughts in the comments below. What's your take on this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. The story of the CEO and the janitor isn't just about a twist of fate. It's a reminder that people can surprise you when you least expect it. In this case, the janitor, whom the CEO belittled, held the key to everything, the company's future, and the redemption of a man who had been wrong in his assumptions. How do you feel about the way things unfolded? Do you think the CEO learned enough from this experience to change? Or was his apology just a quick fix? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because we want to hear from you. Humility isn't always easy to find, but it's a powerful trait that can change everything, from relationships to entire businesses. If you know someone who needs a reminder about the importance of humility and respect, tag them in the comments. Share this story with them and let them see how a simple act of humility can transform a person and the world around them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the way we think about power, respect, and justice. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with our latest videos that inspire, provoke thought, and reveal the hidden lessons in everyday moments. Thanks for being a part of this journey.